Hello everyone, thank you for joining us for the screening of the performance by Khaleb Brooks, Black Boys Can Swim. Khaleb's works are currently on view at Gazelle Art House as part of the group exhibition Curtain Twitching. Please do stop by the gallery if you're around because we reopened last week. Black Boys Can Swim is a performance film piece highlighting Black people's relationship with water. It was filmed on Lamu Island in Kenya, and we are very excited to share it with you today. We will do a short Q&A with the artist afterwards, so please feel free to post questions to the chat or ask the artist if you are here physically at the gallery. Please do not turn your video or microphone throughout the whole session. It will make it much easier for all of us to listen. The Zoom session is going to be recorded and put on our website and social media afterwards. Thank you and enjoy.
You know, in the sailing boats, there is a lot of names there. In our sailing, like Joshi, Handawi, Shariti, Foromani. So there's a lot, Mijari, Kabushi, Sharia. There's a lot of names there. So this is Joshi, you know, this is this. When I do it like this, it's gonna turn. So that's how I learn. I start sailing, like it was like that's our playground, yeah. So we do the sailing since the long time, father's ages, yeah. So we've been taught by our father, yeah. We do a lot of sailing and we have good captains around. So I became the crew first. I learned how to be a crew. Working a lot, we cook in the dhow, go sailing. Yeah, I do some snorkeling around, come back. So it's a big work hard. So the more you are in the dhow, the more you get knowledge, yeah. The more you're in the dhow, the more knowledge you get to land. So we have to pass this water. If it's low tide, you cannot pass here. If it's high tide, you can pass there. My first memory was sailing to Malindi to Lamu, yeah. That was my big memory. That was my first trip to go away into the sea, yeah. Where you are in the sea, you don't see the mangroves, you don't see anywhere, it's just the sea. Yeah, just going with the GPS, yeah. Mind GPS, not the phone GPS. Yeah, so it's a quite good trip, and on the way, we break the mast, yeah. We break the rod and the sail, we had to put it down, and we are lucky people, yeah, we had like 60 liters, yeah, of fuel. So we had to put the engine on, and from this rock called Tenewi to Lamu, yeah, it took us like 3 hours. Use the machine till Lamu, yeah, like on 4, we watched the sunset in Lamu. That was my big memory, yeah. You know, sailing is the first, like I can say, very relaxing thing, yeah. If you go in sailing, you feel you are out of somewhere on your own world, yeah. You feel somewhere, you just feel the wind, feel the mangroves, feel the birds, feel the sea. Just you get the good sounds. So it makes you stress-free, yeah. Takes away all the bad memory, yeah. And just big smiles. It's not that easy, yeah. It's a hard life, yeah, and it's a strong life, yeah. You have like to throw yourself into it. If you want it, you have to face it, yeah. You have to know it. I love being the crew, yeah. Yeah, but if being a captain, I can go with you anywhere. You can call me Captain Midnight.
The first time I saw the ocean, I was 15. The first time I was in deep water was when I was 18. I was in Costa Rica and decided to go snorkeling with a group of friends. And I told them, I was like, I don't know how to swim. And they said that there would be like a life jacket and I wouldn't have to worry about it. So I put on the life jacket, jumped in the water, and immediately started hyperventilating. I think my body was just afraid. I had never swam before. I never been in deep water before. Everyone's like, "You have a life jacket on. Like, what's the problem?" And eventually, I caught my breath, and that's how I first started learning how to swim, was to get over that fear and to be able to tread water. I found out about this diving group called Diving with a Purpose, which is basically these group of black marine archaeologists that go diving looking for sunken slave ships, to document them. And they're funded partly by the Smithsonian, and I just thought it was like one of the coolest things in the world. And I was like, right, so I need to learn how to dive. So a few months later, I took a diving course. And a part of to get the certificate, you have to do a swim test. And I told my instructor, I was like, I'm not the strongest swimmer, but I'm going to go for it. And I swam maybe about 20 to 50 meters out into the water and just went into shock. It was super strange. It was a bit like a outer body experience, because in my brain, in my mind, I was totally calm and serene and pragmatic, but my body started shaking and convulsing, and it got to the point where I couldn't catch my breath. So at this point, I just floated on my back. And I was just floating on my back. I was using whatever deep breathing, meditation I could remember to try and calm myself down. And in my head, I was like, you're gonna be okay. But I also knew I had to be in control. It's like, if you want to survive this, you need to breathe. So do whatever it takes to breathe. And I just remember like looking up at the sky. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, just like counting. And there was a guy swimming next to me who was also doing the diving course or the swim test. And he's like, "Are you okay?" And, I did it like, I did the floating thing maybe 2 or 3 times and kept trying to swim. But I think it got to the point where my body was just too traumatized, and even though I wanted to finish it, I was just I couldn't, So he was like, "Don't panic," and I was like, I'm totally cool. Like I'm not gonna panic. It's so weird to explain like how your body can respond to something, and you're telling yourself something totally different. So he slowly pulls me over to the coast, and I get back to the instructor and I get out of the water. And I'm still really shaky and having a hard time catching my breath. And the first thing he says is like, black people can't swim. And basically tells me how my bone density and my muscle mass is the reason why I can't float in water. And I just remember being so angry. So angry. And, you know, he was a difficult guy. I mean, I was doing the course in Italy, if that tells you anything. And I went down, you know, right after that. He was like, well, you know, I guess you kind of swam. And we went right into diving. And I was still a bit shaky, but, you know, was going down. And then he started, you know, because of the wetsuits and I have locks, it fits my hair differently, obviously, than other people. So he was, you know, making fun of my hair underwater and kind of saying that I wouldn't be able to dive because of my hair. It was really frustrating. It was a really difficult moment for me, really wanting something, and my body just rejecting it, just fully rejecting it. I remember I was first trying to go down in the water. Something in me was just like, what are you doing? You can't breathe underwater. You can't breathe underwater. And I remember finally when I got it and just like having my feet touch the ocean floor. And really, I mean, it's like you're an astronaut, you know, you're trying to get the buoyancy, there's no gravity in the same sense, and it's another world down there. It's totally magical. It's like you're on another planet.
When I'm in the water, I like diving. When I'm in the boats, I like fishing. I like the water because there's loads of fish, and you could just jump in and dive. I love it when my head goes under the water. It's the best thing ever. When I catch fish, I love it, but when it's squid, I get squirted with ink.
We take them as the age of 6 years. Just come and just have a water in a basin. Just try to show him or her how to swim. Because here in Lamu, you must be good in swimming. Because sometimes you just take that's the nose. When you're there and it capsizes, what are you going to do? You can't say, do you want to die? No, you must be knowing how to swim. So we take them here to swim, we just show them. how to float. You see that there one rule called Boyle's law that we take in physics in high school. Just came and told you, see the floating, how you make yourself how to float. And that is how you always do it. Sometimes the waves are very tight, are very high. So when the boat is moving and it can capsize, you know how to droning of the boat, capsizing of it. So that child can be able to come out of that boat and swim and come out of the ground.
Really dark.
Okay. That was beautiful. Okay. Thank you so much. That was great. I think everybody loved it. And yeah, beautiful work. So we actually collected a few questions on Instagram just today, and there are quite a few of them. And also, if you guys in the audience have any questions to Khaleb, also feel free to ask. But okay, let's do this. Maybe we can start with just how this idea came about, and did it start with your personal relationships with water, or it was more general research? If you would like to say something about this.
Yeah, definitely. Well, as you know, I was supposed to come back to the UK like a few weeks ago and do like a live performance in the gallery in relation to the show. And then there were some like new lockdown restrictions. So I actually ended up getting quite like happily stuck in Kenya. And I actually came through Kenya because I was in South Africa, and I was coming here because Kenya wasn't on the red list. So I was like, okay, I'll just like pop through Kenya and then go to the UK. And now they've actually added Kenya to the red list. So I was thinking about what I could do here to kind of like offer not only like a piece of like my experience here, but also obviously still have some sort of performance be available for everyone to see at the show. So yeah, it's been really, I mean, it was really impromptu. It was shot over the last week and edited over the last week. So it's been a really hectic week. And I guess it's come out of my experiences here with connecting with loads of the captains and the boat boys. I think also like kind of like a personal interest I've had for a really long time with or in sailing, maritime culture, boats. And I think also like Lamu is the kind of place where you can't like you're always in a boat, like you can't really escape it because like to get to different parts of the island you have to hop in like a boat taxi and all that stuff. So I felt like suddenly like immersed in this very intensely quite like water driven life. And then also as some of you know, and Tina, as you know, like so much of my work kind of centers and is around researching the transatlantic slave trade. So water is something that is continuously coming up and featuring in everything that I do. So I started, I had some ideas, I guess, as far as like visuals for the film, and then I started shooting. And I also knew I wanted to like kind of capture my own tension, I guess, or like experiences with water. So then I shot everything, and then the narratives came later. I kind of like pieced the visuals together, and I was like, okay, like this, like we're meant to like tell our stories with these visuals. So, yeah.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned your research on Atlantic slave trade, and there was another question. So, how do you? I mean, I'm sure it's connected, but how do you apply this take on relationships of Black people with that research? Is it directly connected, or just like, and how it's connected? I'm just really curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely connected. I think immersing, I think any type of like work, and it happens, I think, with people doing like PhDs and stuff as well. Like when you intensely immerse yourself in a topic that's like really, really, really traumatic, I think it can kind of be all consuming. So I think like when I think of water, I think it's become like this symbol of pain, but also like this abyss, kind of like this graveyard, and then all of these like quite awful stories, I guess, like come to mind from those things that I'm reading. So for example, like, you know, in slavery, I mean, I'm specifically talking about like US context now, but like in slavery, for example, Black people weren't taught how to swim, because if you could swim and you escaped, dogs weren't able to, like, you know, catch your scent and chase you on water. So I think even beginning with those stories, so you have the Middle Passage where you have this quite traumatic relationship with the water, and then boom, you are put in the situation where you're not allowed to swim. And then, I mean, Emancipation Proclamation happens, and 13th Amendment happens, and then, you know, slavery ends, and then you end up with 100 years of like Jim Crow. And Jim Crow, I feel like, I mean, I think a lot of people, when they think of Jim Crow laws, they think of segregation, and they think that there's this like reality where like, okay, well, just everything is separate schools, separate this, separate that. But the reality is that Jim Crow, because of that segregation, made it so there was actually no funding for Black facilities. So Black people didn't even have access to pools until probably like the late 60s, during like the civil rights movement and stuff. And then even then, after the civil rights movement, I mean, you have kind of like all of that trauma from before, and then you have, you know, access to swimming and swimming lessons because it's expensive. So I think for me it's a part. I think the relationship with water is like a part of that history. And I mean, just as we know with loads of other things, like if your parents haven't done it, and it's much harder for you to be able to do that. I think we see that with education. You know, you're more likely to go to college if your parent has gone to college, and all this stuff. This kind of like, you know, I think especially in Western countries, we have this kind of like aspirational positioning of the diaspora. So it's constantly like, how can we create access? How can we learn these things? But yeah, I would say that for me, it's like all very much rooted in that and like connected.
It's also kind of explored in your paintings, right? So for once, you depict like sea creatures is one side of this. I guess you always sort of come back to this topic, right? And then also I am particularly thinking about the piece 100% cotton, which I have upstairs actually, if you guys want to see it. And it's also sort of about like Atlantic slave trade. So and I was just wondering, actually, that was another question of how performance and painting are different as mediums to maybe explore the same theme, or just generally, how is it different for you?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like painting is very much like a part of that research. I think it's this attempt to engage with things that are really like traumatic or painful, or just like experiences or like different expressions of identity, and kind of like amalgamating that or like putting it in the context of the archive or historical record or objects, and kind of like creating this conversation, and hopefully facilitating or offering a new narrative to happen with those experiences and stories and history, and kind of creating this new engagement with what our present is, and like what our futures can be. But I think with performance, it's a lot more visceral. I think that like performance for me is something that I'm just like in my feelings. And I think it's like an opportunity to like to work through like whatever those feelings are. So like, you know, maybe that's me being like really pissed off about something. For example, like the first performance I did with Gazelle, I think, you know, that performance was about the deaths of Black trans women, and really about the deaths of Black people in general, and just being so exhausted and tired. And, you know, I think, you know, in that one, I was literally like yelling in people's faces. And then, I mean, this performance was a bit different though. I think this was the first time that it wasn't like, you know, centering my body. Well, it was centering my body in a way, but it was different because I feel like before, in a lot of other stuff, I center my body kind of as this site of trauma. And I think that kind of allows, for me, it's like, you know, whether you're allowing yourself to have a breakdown or grieving or screaming or all of these things, it allows me to have that space. But I think it also facilitates space for other people to feel like they can enter those emotions as well, which I don't think we're really allowed to do very much, like in the society that we live in. But I think with this particular piece or my performance in it, I think it was a lot more removed because I shot that without knowing the story that I was going to put over it. So it was a lot more like calm and tranquil and like in the sea. And I knew I wanted to show my emotional responses to and feelings in the sea, and kind of using the fabric to kind of engage with that tension, and also like the drowning and all of that stuff. But the kind of like, I guess the trauma or like the feeling and the story came separately and came later, but the images together ended up working. It was actually quite nice to have it work in that way.
Yeah, there is actually one question about this traumatic situation that you describe in the film, about this coach telling you about this like muscle structure, whatever, Black people that stops you from learning how to swim. And that's a tough question, but still I have to ask this. So can you think of other examples of lies you were told about being Black? And
yeah, of course. I think that's like, I don't know. I think that's a part of being Black. Like, I think the reality is that you're continuously engaging with stereotypes about yourself and continuously in spaces where you have to figure out how you want to exist and simultaneously with those stereotypes, and whether that means ignoring them, whether that means trying to prove them wrong. I think especially when you're young, that can be a factor, especially if you're not, I mean, depending where you are as well, like who you're growing up around, if there's other Black kids around. I mean, I think, the typical ones, black people are thieves, or, Black men are inherently violent. And, obviously the state perpetuates these types of stereotypes. I was talking to someone about this other day, and I think I have so much internalized anxiety just around like entering a shop. Like I think I've spent so many years being stared at and followed. Like I have this weird thing where like I go into a shop and I don't know what to do with my hands. And I didn't realize what was happening. I just get like really awkward, and I'm like folding my arms or putting my hand in my pockets. Or I'm like, maybe I shouldn't put my hands in my pockets because it looks like I put something in my pockets. And all of these things that go on in your head, it kind of makes you quite crazy after, spending so long in that space and being perceived in that way. And I also think about like when I first went on testosterone as well, like I think that, I think the first time I realized I was passing was when I was walking down the street and a white woman crossed the street after she saw me. And then also around the same time being on a train and saw someone like clutch their purse and being like, what the, like, what? Like, I'm just getting so angry. Like, how dare you? But I think there's also an element for me, being trans and like really, really feeling difference. Obviously, I think, being perceived as a Black woman, there's a whole other set of issues. But I think, the violent nature of being, the experience of being perceived as a Black man in our society is it's a totally different can of worms. And I think for me, that's been really intense, actually feeling the difference. I think it's one thing to know that it's happening, but to experience both is really, really frustrating. It's really frustrating.
That sounds really tough. Yeah, I don't even want to comment on this, but thanks for sharing. That's really tough. And so there is also a question about Chicago and about this environment that you grew up in. But it's more about artistic scene there rather than general society. So have you been experiencing any influence by African American artists? So actually, maybe we can expand on this and just like generally African American people who would inspire you and just I don't know, just show you the way in a way, or anything like this.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, I didn't know I mean, it's weird. It's weird, right? Because I think so I think there's two sides to this. I think growing up in Chicago is a totally immersive artistic experience, And I was looking at that question. It's, I think I was thinking about like Black performance art in Chicago and just like how culture itself exists in this like quite intense, I don't know, performative space. Like, I mean, growing up, like, footworking was really big when I was a kid, like juking, like going to juke parties, roller skating. My parents grew up, when house music was really big in Chicago, had like had a fake ID when I was like 14, and I was sneaking into like jazz clubs and blues clubs and all these type of things. So I think that like Chicago's it's a big city. I think it's a very like fast paced, hard realm. And I think, I don't know, I feel like the personalities and I don't know, I'm sure you guys know Kanye West. That's a perfect example of a Chicago personality. I think people are quite really, I don't know, over the top and really just quite they don't really hold back. And I think, growing up with, Gwendolyn Brooks and Herbie Hancock and I don't know, so many. Oh, sorry, it's a wasp. So many different, oh my God, I'm actually allergic to wasps. So, so many different, just so many different things happening. And I was a part of this apprenticeship program called Gallery 37 when I was like, I think I was like 14, and it was like really hard to get into. So I was like, oh my God, it was like every year I was applying and I finally got in. I was like, yeah. And it's like, it was this program for Maggie Daly at the time, which is the mayor's wife, had this programming for inner city kids to have access to like basically state of the art art programming. And so I was also immersed in that as well. But it's funny because I didn't think that you could be an artist. With all of that going on, I didn't think that you could be an artist. I didn't think it was a possibility or an opportunity. And I think that also comes from just growing up in a Black family and that being seen as like a hobby and not a career. So I think, you know, only in the last few years have I like, I would say maybe like 5-6 years ago, I started finding out about, you know, Kara Walker, Wangechi Mutu, Carrie James Marshall, even Theaster Gates, who's from Chicago, who has like an amazing library placed there now. You know, I mean, loads of art. I mean, there's a Black canon now. There's a huge group of people you can look to and say, okay, they've done this and they're on par with everyone else. I mean, to me, they've surpassed everyone else. So I think that's like a really exciting, I guess, reality to live in, but still feels like super, super new.
So this idea to become an artist, how did this develop? And then the other question is, because you say, oh, you discovered this works by Carl Walker just a few years back. So maybe you could also tell a little bit about the residencies that you've done and how they helped to develop the work, because there is a question about this anyway. So we might just...
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think I've always been like creating. I think that's something that I've always done. My grandma was an artist and like always like really encouraged my imagination. She used to take me to this like huge craft store in the States called Hobby Lobby and just be like, okay, you need to stock up on art supplies, get whatever you wanted. So like she really like fueled that at quite a young age. But I would say that I moved to the UK to do my master's at SOAS, which was in violence, conflict, and development. So like totally international development related. That's what I was like doing before. And I started interning at an art gallery. And that actually, it's funny because the house that I'm staying in, it's her house. So that's how I'm here. But she's fantastic. And she, I don't know. I just being there, I was really exposed. That was the first time I was exposed to the art world. It was the first time I found out what Frieze was, 2014, had no idea what it was. Went to Frieze, went to Art Fair Paris, went to all of these places. And I was like, I can do this. Like I can really do this. And this is what I have to be doing. So then I did like this internship at UNOPS. And that was like the last time I worked in development. And it was like, I was quite disillusioned. I was like, this is actually gonna kill me if I have to like, I don't know, development's actually quite corporate. And, you know, I was doing a lot of documentary work at the time, but like spending a lot of time at a desk. And I was just like, this is not how I'm gonna live my life, you know?
Well, yeah, you're doing much better now. We're very happy about the choices. Do you guys have some questions here? I can continue. I have like a lot of questions, but then maybe... Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what's the type about intimate, the cultivation of water?
Okay, did you hear that?
No, I can't hear it. What did he say?
Okay, so the question about, if I heard right, actually, I didn't hear well because it was well. So how does the experience of relationships of Black people with water in Kenya different from your own experience? How would you describe this different?
I mean, it's really interesting. It's interesting on so many levels. I think, particularly in Lamu, it's like complete. You might even be able to hear it because they're doing the call to prayer right now. So they do 5 times a day. There's a call to prayer. It's a completely Muslim Swahili society, and it's interesting because I feel like specifically on this part of the coast, Swahili culture has been preserved and quite an incredible way. You know, like people are riding donkeys mostly as transportation around the island and everything. So it's definitely very different from Chicago, for example, or being in London. But I think that I think probably for me the biggest difference is just like communicating with people who have different, I guess, like ideas of like what tradition is, and what people hold dear as tradition. And I think you know, me being perceived as male opens up a lot of doors, and I have a lot of access and a lot of conversations that, like, for example, like my sister who's here doesn't necessarily maybe have the same. So I think that's been quite interesting. But I think I mean, it's been really fun. I think we're just like learning from each other, you know, like I think hanging out with some of the guys here, just like sharing music. I mean, you know, they're listening to all the same music I'm listening to, but then also be like, okay, that's enough of that. And then turning that off and being like, now we're gonna have a drum session and we're gonna sing like Swahili, like traditional songs.
Go
So I think
clean
it's
that.
also,
Clean it right now. It's so dirty.
Somebody has to mute himself. Sorry, one second. Someone was
what's dirty?
Your fucking face.
It's the, I don't
I'm
know how to,
not
I
sure.
can't do it.
Whoever's doing this, please mute yourself because I can't see you. But okay, hopefully it's done now.
But yeah, so it's like
Your fucking face is dirty, you whore ass nigger.
Sorry, just give me a second, okay?
did they just call me a nigger?
No, it's somebody here, but I just...
Yes, fucking nigger, and I'm white. I'm still saying it.
Wow, cool. That's good to know. So interesting conversation while we're talking about Blackness.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Wow. No, it's okay. I mean, welcome to reality, right?
Niggas in my butthole. Niggas in my butthole. Niggas in my butthole.
It's a troll. You can do a thing where you can like mute everyone, or you can also like kick them out.
One second. Okay, I found it.
Oh no, they're still there.
Bitch, I have control over your fucking mouse. You know, I'm a fucking hacker, asshole.
Okay, let's leave and come back.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Wow. No, I think they.
That was.
Are you sure? Are you sure they're not still there?
Yeah. I think I did remove the person. That was mad. Okay.
Typical. I mean.
Say, but that was intense. Okay. There was like a troll attack or something like that. Wow. Okay. Like another dimension, just like.
No, it's this dimension.
Okay, sorry about that. Definitely something but out of control. Where were we?
No, I think we should talk about that. I don't think we can just like, I mean, the reality is that, like, you know, I think that, I mean, obviously I think that probably this person saw that there was something that was like Black happening and like Black empowerment happening, and like actively decided to engage with it. Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think it's important to talk about, because I think these are the type of things that happen and people don't believe you. Like people like, oh, well, that wouldn't happen. It's funny because I was talking to my sister before this and I was like, oh, I'm feeling a bit nervous about being on live. I'm feeling a bit nervous about, you know, having these conversations that are like really vulnerable, where, you know, I'm talking about my experiences and my body, and talking about being trans, and talking about having been a sex worker. I'm talking about, you know, all these things that are quite vulnerable, you know. And I've talked to you about my story a bit before. And then I think you have these like, I would say that like those type of interferences is like, that is like the reality of like being a Black person. You're just living your life. I think you're just living your life. You're trying to create spaces, you're trying to create conversations, and then you continuously have these interferences and these obstacles and these blockages and these, I mean, like freaking white supremacists on my Twitter page. You know what I mean? So I think it's interesting. I think it's actually really relevant to the conversation that we're having. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and do you think this experience is universal? If we go back to that question between like your experience and those, I don't know, those kids in Kenya that you were filming, can you relate, or do you think it's?
Well, I think that's, you know, I also think that's something I'm thinking about more with like, where do I want to be located? I mean, I will always be located within the South Side of Chicago as, you know, as a little Black trans kid. I think that's my place of, you know, jumping off from. But, you know, one of the things I'm thinking about a lot right now is where I'm working from in my location and how I engage with my Blackness and how Blackness exists in Western countries, how it exists in predominantly white countries, and whether or not that's a space that I want to keep creating from. And also just thinking about raising a family, and, you know, I'm raising a Black kid in the States, raising a Black kid in England, you know, I mean, people don't want to acknowledge that, but the reality is it's such a different experience. Obviously, I mean, it's actually not that, I mean, I'm sure people can imagine, it's a different experience growing up as other. And I think, yeah, there's media, yeah, there's colorism, yeah, there's all of these like horrible things that are happening that like we can't escape. But I think there's something to be said about growing up in a predominantly Black environment where you're not consciously aware of your color. I think that ultimately will always be a different feeling. And I imagine my kids, I'm like, wow, imagine they could grow up and not think about being Black. You know, they're not being told that they're Black. You know what I mean? Because as soon as you be growing up, I mean, I've had that talk. You have to have that talk at a really young age. I just saw this video actually on Instagram of these kids in like the 19, sorry, my brain's going all over, but I just saw this video on Instagram of these kids in the 1960s, and they were in like this Black Power classroom, and you know, they were asked like, what's your nationality? And they were like, I'm African American. Like, what's your this? What's your this? And it was kind of building this into them. And they're like, okay, if I give you $1, will you say that you're a Negro child? And they were like, no. If I give you this, here's some ice cream, will you say that you're this? And they were like, no. And this was a 4-year-old little boy. And that's the reality of having to program your kids to have the self-worth to come up against everything they're going to come up against. So I think, yeah, I think it's very different being here. But also, I mean, it's lots of, you know, I'm still American. I think also, you know, I'm coming in here with an American passport, a lot of privilege, living in England, and, you know, also in a lot of ways, I have a dollar sign on my head. So I think like engaging with poverty and deciding in what ways I want to position myself here, in what ways I have to be positioned here, in what ways do I find comfort, and in what ways do I seek stability, and then and negotiating all of that with the reality of poverty of other people is something that I'm also constantly thinking about and constantly trying to figure out how to engage with. Excuse me. I remember like, I mean, when I was young and I started traveling quite early, I would just give away like a lot of my money. And I was like, actually, you just can't just give away. Like that's not sustainable either. And that's also like not helping people. So I also think that, yeah, I mean, sometimes, I mean, in that situation, I think in the immediacy, it can be helpful, but you know, yeah, I think they're all things that I'm thinking about.
Wow, that's a lot to think about, actually. Yeah, thank you. That's great. And I
just got nervous of this picture that popped up.
Yeah, well, it's
Who are you?
no, attacking our friendly chat. That was really brutal. Do you guys
It could just be a photo. I could just be now I'm racially profiling.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you guys have other questions maybe? I have one more, but I'm happy to pass it on. Yes,
Picture froze on his picture. Is that his own writing, or did he take it from someone else? Curious.
which one?
What
Yes, but please have a take on this. So we are looking at the.
What inspired him to write it?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So we're looking at the. Oh my God! Please
Hi, girls. Hi.
stop doing this. Okay.
What is happening?
What is going on?
This is wild.
Okay. It's like the audience is not very friendly on Zoom. We have a very nice vibe here, but like on Zoom, wild going on. Anyway, we're looking at your painting, which is an octopus, and there is a writing on it. So if you could tell a little bit about the writing and how you came up with it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Maybe I should actually pull it up for myself 1 second so I can read it to you. Hold on. Sorry, I'm a bit edgy now. I'm a bit on guard because you don't know what's gonna be said next. Okay, here it is, sorry. Actually, I'm not gonna apologize because that was really trash. What happened? Let's see. Okay, here. So, you will find us with sight in darkness at the witching hour, high tide and beaming, swayed only by permanence and exalted by the certainty that time is blind to us and before is malleable, evolution endless, expedient, without glory and always faithfully anew. So I think for me, I think the text coming through speaks a bit to like my spoken word poetry background. And I think with this project, I was thinking a lot about time. And I think there's a lot of conversations, I think, especially with Black artists being had around Western concepts.
I love you, Obama.
Jesus Christ.
Barack.
Okay, 1 second. This is not funny. Understand. Okay, I think I removed every questionable
He
person.
loves Barack Obama.
Oh my God. Okay.
Hectic.
I'm not gonna admit anyone to this
I
chat.
don't even smoke, and I'm like, I need a cigarette. Yeah, so the text is, I would say that it's kind of, for me, comes from this conversation that I've also been having with a lot of artists, and also that the project kind of speaks to around Western concepts of time, which is very, very linear. And I think that's something that's very much rooted in history. And I think for me, history is something that's very fixed, as opposed to memory, which is something that is malleable or something like of the senses, or something that's based on feelings, and something that is constantly changing. And I think that, Saidiya Hartman has this quote that I really love, and it's let me not mess it up. It's that history is fiction endorsed by state power. And I think for me that speaks to kind of this, oppressive reality that, usually the winners of wars, or, whoever wants to write that history is writing it in their own favor. So I think for me is like, thinking about the Middle Passage as this kind of like linear space. And I think thinking of Black people as kind of living in this space of, not linear space, liminal space, and existing in this space of liminality where, you've come from something, whether that be pre-colonial culture or, taken from their motherland, and you're on your way to something, or this reality exists of citizenship, of being a human, but you're not a part of that. You're kind of this in between, this non-human, this non-citizen, this non-existing state. And I think within that space, I think there's power. And I think one thing I'm really curious about is like how, and there's this really great book called, what is it called? Is it Habeas Corpus? It's by Alexander Wahelier. And he kind of talks about like using not having agency as a tool of resistance? Like, what power can be found in that space? And I think for me, it's like, you know, you're not existing in that new space. So you have the ability to imagine something totally new. You know, whether that be decentralized governments, whether that be, I mean, who knows? I mean, the world's flipped on its head just since COVID. So, I mean, I think that can also show us, I mean, I think it's a good example of like what is possible, which hopefully is not the reality that we were living in before, because a lot of people have been suffering.
Thank you. That was great. I don't have any more questions. That was really beautiful. Thank you. And apologies for all this hacking incident, but we have more. No. Just saying hi. Okay. That was great. And we really loved your piece. Thank you so much for creating it, for sharing it with us. Yeah, can you hear us clapping? Well, clapping.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, also for everyone who's still on Zoom, we are gonna record this. It's been recorded and we're gonna put it on the website and all our social platforms. So you're gonna be able to share it with friends. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate you. Appreciate your questions.
Bye.